When you want to add power and quality to your long chop, the feeling on contact should be to absorb the ball, not have it bounce off immediately. Alright, today we're going to cover service returns, specifically for short forehand serves. I'll first teach you how to chop it long down the line, not just pushed it. When receiving serves, you must have the mindset to actively chop the ball long. When you receive a short forehand serve, you tend to just make a transitional push. This mindset is a huge mistake. If you only think about transitioning in practice, your shot will be soft in a match, allowing your opponent to attack first. You must first learn to execute a heavy chop down the line, and second, a sidespin push to your opponent's middle. The third is chopping short to the wide-angle corner. Let's start with the first one, chopping long to the opponent's backhand corner. Why can't you execute this properly? It's because when you step in, you're not in the proper stance to execute a chop. If you step in and lift the ball from underneath, that's just a scoop. If you push forward from the back of the ball, that's a send. Only when you raise your racket and cut downwards into the ball can it be called a chop. I believe many amateur players are afraid to chop because they fear hitting the net. Why do you fear hitting the net? First, you're making contact with the ball at the very end of your stroke. You hit the net because you fail to create friction and don't reach the ball properly, not because of the spin. The second reason is that upon contact, your arm instinctively pulls back. It's like looping. You should be driving through the ball. But the moment we feel the spin, we instinctively soften our touch. This is a common flaw in pushing as well. You're hesitant to chop because you stop your motion too early when the ball comes to your forehand, failing to follow through. From my experience with amateurs, short, in-table serves aren't that spinny. You can absolutely raise your racket higher to chop down on it. You don't need to scoop it. You end up scooping because you step in too late. Contact the ball as it's falling, you're too far away, and you stop your stroke prematurely, which prevents you from generating friction. The reason I stress keeping your racket close to the ball for pushes is that this proximity allows you to generate high quality while maintaining control and consistency. This principle is the same for both pushing and flicking. Let me demonstrate. To ensure the ball goes over, generating power after contact is much easier to control than generating it from a large backswing. Let me demonstrate a common amateur mistake: taking too large a backswing and contacting the ball too late. The concept of a chop is to contact the ball on the lower half of your racket and direct your force forward and downward. If you just push forward, the ball will go long or even off the table. Your pushing motion must go downwards. This downward chop is crucial. If you want your forehand chop to force your opponent to lift their arm up to retrieve the ball, instead of letting them loop it, your racket path must be from high to low. You can only generate good friction by contacting the ball at a high point. So, how do we find this high point? Look at my racket height. It's higher than you think, right? Usually, you feel the heavy spin and keep your racket too low. The correct technique isn't to push from below, but to chop down from a higher position. If your racket is too low, you'll contact the ball on the upper part of the blade, resulting in a high push. But when I raise my racket, I can make contact on the lower half of the blade, securing that friction first, then completing the stroke. That's a chop. So, the first key concept is to start with your hand higher. A high backswing creates space to move downwards. A low backswing only allows you to push forward, which is just a scoop. Only by cutting downwards like this will your return have a strong downward dip. The second key point: for all short forehand balls, your elbow must be kept down. With your elbow down acting as a pivot, you can flexibly control the angle to go cross-court or down the line. If your elbow isn't pointing down, your entire arm will move as one unit. The result is you either chop it off the table or pop it up high. For a forehand push, the closer the racket tip is to your face, the heavier your chop will be. The farther away it is, the lower the quality of your shot. For instance, if I chop with the racket close to my body, the ball will be spinny. If I extend my arm straight out, there will be no spin. Third point, when chopping down the line, your racket face must be aimed straight. If it's angled, the ball will go cross-court. Chopping down the line isn't about pushing with your forearm. It's about raising the racket and using the racket tip to guide the direction. Because adding power to a down-the-line shot while keeping it on the table is inherently difficult, it's very easy to make errors. So, when you push, you must raise the racket and use your fingers to activate the wrist, and the wrist to activate the forearm, making a sharp downward tapping motion. Let me show you. It's a downward tap. This has to be an explosive, short burst of power. The feeling of this snap is a sharp pop on contact, where you stop your motion immediately after generating force, instead of using brute strength. The fifth key point is the feeling in your hand when pushing. Let me explain this touch. The feeling should be like absorbing the ball into the racket. You must not be tense, because the ball path is short in the table. If your hand is stiff when you try to apply force, you'll immediately lose control. If you're not trying to chop long and are just making a steady transitional push, it's not as easy to make a mistake. When you want to add power and quality to your long chop, the feeling on contact should be to absorb the ball, not have it bounce off immediately. Be soft on contact, and then accelerate as you follow through. You must remember this feeling. In my in-person clinics, I teach pushing hands-on, and I find that 99% of players apply force too early and have a stiff grip. So your touch must be soft, with a relatively relaxed grip. Wait until the ball contacts your racket, then apply force as you begin your forward stroke. This will increase your consistency. You must apply this key feeling. It keeps your hand from being stiff, allowing you to generate high quality in the second half of your stroke. If your hand is stiff early on, you can only ensure consistency by reducing your power later, which prevents you from producing a high-quality shot. Looping has the same feeling. First, let the rubber grip the ball, and then accelerate forward to propel it. The second technique is the sidespin push, which is commonly used by players like Sun Sha. Often, our anticipation is slow and we step in late. If you still try to chop in that situation, you need exceptional touch or you'll likely hit the net. However, if your anticipation is slow and you miss the high point, you can use the sidespin push just as the ball starts to drop. As you can see, the contact point for my sidespin push can be quite late. You can certainly execute it earlier as well. When the serve comes, I can proactively use this sidespin push. Sun Sha uses this technique very often. I believe she uses this return first, to neutralize the strongest part of the spin, and second, to create a curving trajectory that makes it difficult for her opponent, buying herself time to recover. For amateur players, the sidespin push can compensate for slow anticipation. Because many amateurs have deceptive serves, mixing long and short. If you get faked out on a short serve, you won't have time to step in. Trying to chop will lead to an error, so you're often forced to just scoop it over. In this situation, using a sidespin push allows you to maintain quality while also being a safe, consistent option. Let me demonstrate. A serve with slight spin is perfect for this, but it won't work against a pure sidespin topspin serve. Against pure sidespin topspin, you still use a similar motion, but you must change your racket angle to be more like a flick. And for sidespin backspin, you use a standard push angle. The core principle remains the same. Now, let's break down the principles and key points of the sidespin push. For shakehand grip, use the butt of the racket as a reference. During the backswing, the butt points sideways. After contact, it rotates to point upwards. It's the same for penhold, from sideways to upwards. The ball produced will have a very tricky, floating trajectory. When the butt of your racket ends up pointing upwards, it means your wrist has completed the full trajectory of a sidespin push. A standard push has a straight back and forth path. But a sidespin push uses the wrist to create a rotational path. The motion path is from your right side inwards towards your body, finishing in front of you with the racket but pointing up. It's the same for penhold. If you can't get the feeling, imagine doing a short left side spin serve. The racket but goes from pointing sideways to pointing upwards. You can also use this sidespin push on long balls, but not against sidespin topspin. The return from this shot is very floaty and awkward for your opponent. This might seem like a flashy trick shot to a professional, but for amateurs, it's a very effective weapon. Remember, with the sidespin push, don't generate too much forward force. Be bold and generate force sideways, because the more sideways force, the more the ball will float. The third technique is the hook push, which uses a motion similar to a hook serve. The only difference is that you're receiving their serve, using a hook serve motion to return it. Chopping long is a fundamental push, but if you want to win points off your receive in a match, you can't be predictable. A direct long chop has the risk of using too much power. But what if you use a hooking motion to handle it? I often use this in doubles. For example, after the opponent serve and move out of the way, if I hook push to the short, wide forehand, a push to the spot will make his footwork very awkward. Just like a right side spin serve, the force is directed sideways, not forward. Pushing forward will easily go off the table. The key is to create good friction. The motion is to brush the side of the ball, directing it towards the sideline. Don't push it forward, as that will likely go out. The feeling is just like hitting a right side spin serve. Although your racket angle isn't as extreme, the direction of force is identical. When performing this push, you must first keep your forearm close to your body. If you open up your forearm, you lose the space to generate sideways force. This is the same principle as a hook serve. So, keep your forearm tucked in and brush the side of the ball. If your service return arsenal includes the sidespin push, the hook push, and the long chop, these deceptive variations will make your opponent extremely uncomfortable. The most difficult serves to handle are a combination of short to the forehand and long to the backhand. When these two spots are targeted, players tend to panic. Against a left side spin serve, you can use either the sidespin push or the hook push technique we just covered. Against a right side spin serve, reverse pendulum, you can use the sidespin push or a conventional long chop. But the prerequisite for all of these techniques is that you must generate friction on the ball, not just block it. Don't be fooled by my small motion, I'm using a lot of hidden power in my hand. Without that control, the ball would fly off the table.